Hi, Cypress Sarah again. And one of the questions I've been asked is really about how to cope in a world that is apparently constantly in flux and moving around, be it politically, economically, socially. But I think when our world around us is feeling like so unstable, it's hard to feel a centre of stability within ourselves. So it could be called resilience. Coping, I like to call it looking after our emotional engine. So, I've got a few ideas for you today about how we can look after our emotional engine so that we can cope better with this wild and crazy world of ours. So, let me just share the screen with you. Okay, so here am I. Here's little me. Resilience is the emotional power of choice, and you'll either love it or hate it with me when I talk a lot about decision making and choices. But emotional resilience is what we choose to do next. The decision we make when we're not coping and struggling is really paramount to our ability to cope. And as you can see from the photo there of me with my Uncle David, a very long time ago, hence my age, looking lovely with my flick back Farrah Fawcett hairdo. And it looks like wine, but it's actually Coca-Cola. The choice for me to put that photo online probably isn't the best one in the world, but there you go. So my WTF moment happened at 11. And what happened was at 11, me and my sister were in a bookstore, my older sister, and mum was buying groceries and stuff like that. And there was a little round book holder with all these kind of very, very childlike books or romance novels, the kind of stuff you'd buy, as a temptation when you're picking up your groceries. Anyway, my sister and I were there looking at it, and she chose a book which was all about, how love can conquer even the worst of men. And, I think that led her down a really strange path. And I chose a book called, look, it was something like Knowing Your Subconscious. I don't know if that's the actual title, it's so long ago now, but it was really about unconscious, knowing your emotions, knowing your power to let your emotions rule yourself or not. Now, I'm not saying by 11 I had mastered this art. It took me another at least 20 years to get my head around it, but it stuck with me about this power of choice. And what I mean is, it said, like, in one chapter, no one makes you angry. You allow yourself to become angry. You choose to allow yourself to become angry. And that has resonated, I think, right through my professional career, and particularly with my clients. It's a weird concept to grapple with, because we think we are subject to our emotions, and when people upset us, that is a normal response set. It is to a certain degree, but we can choose to allow people to affect us or not. So I think that's always been a really great start point for me when I'm talking to people, is know that you have a choice about how you let people affect you. And that then also occurs with how you let others affect you, how you let the world affect you, how you let what you can't control affect you. Okay, so let's talk about high performers, or hypos as I call them. And these are people who in generally are quite determined, very positive, take on a lot of pressure, look at the world as an adventure, something to conquer, if you like. So a lot of these people will be in management, in education, in business, in organisations. And here's some interesting stuff that some research showed over a 15-year study. And the main point is, the more performance-driven we are, the more that we like to achieve, and the more we succeed in our achievements, and that can be across any sphere at all, the less self-development we engage in. So the more successful we feel we become, the less work we do on ourselves, which is, I'm going to tell you, not the greatest kind of outcome of success. So a 15-year study showed that we just generally had better mental health pre the pandemic, and I think we all kind of know that. After the pandemic, we have become more resilient. We are mentally tough and kind of pressure ready, but yet 6% of us who are hypos will experience anxiety and tension, and 3% will still suffer some form of depression. Now, this is a really interesting stuff here. 95% of us are totally unaware that we are unaware. So that means there's 95% of a collection of subjects who were pretty high pose, pretty high performance people, but not all CEOs, generally people who are successful in their careers. And it extends out to people who maybe are struggling, because the more you struggle, the more unaware you are of yourself, your strengths and strategies. But 95% of us think we are self-aware when we're not. And 80% of us lie about this. 45% of us lack true insight. Now, that's not me attacking the world out there, and I'm not saying I'm the only person who has some insight, although I've spent a lot of time trying to gain that. What I'm saying is we are under this myth that we know a lot more about ourselves than we actually do. So let's have just a little look here, shall we? I'll move that up. Okay, high pose. High performance people often disconnect from negative emotions because they feel they are a distraction. So they don't value them, and they don't see them as the body's beautiful warning sign. Most high pose hit critical mass before they recognise the impact. So what that means is you're at burnout before you realised you were actually struggling. And a lot of this shows up in physical symptoms: colds, stomach complaints, headaches, injuries. So when we're talking about resilience and we're talking about coping with this very stressful world of ours, if you're starting to experience some physical symptoms, they may be a sign that you are masking those negative emotions, that you are thinking they're a bit too much of a distraction, and that you're getting closer to meeting that hitting that critical mass, which is about burnout. And what happens when this happens is that we have more workplace psychological injuries, we have burnout, which causes faltered decision-making, we become biased and judgmental about what's happening around us, and we experience a lack of personal and professional growth. So when we're talking about our emotional engine, we're also talking about when we are in a performance-based job or a performance-based career. That can be acting, it can be filmmaking, it can be running an organisation, it can be charity work. Wherever our performance has meaning, then we are more likely to disconnect from negative emotions because we feel they are useless. And that means that we are not in tune with the amount of stress and pressure, anxiety and depression. That level of pressure with a high performance person can come with. So it's very important that you listen to your body, you stay connected to your emotions, and you don't pretend that you're not struggling when you actually are. So this is one of my favourite quotes. Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I'm changing myself. And I think when we are going to talk about emotional resilience, coping, how to stay mentally well, how to stay mentally healthy, our emotional engines need to be explored, need to be cared for, and we need to realise that being wise is not the same as being clever. And being wise is to understand that change comes from us, and that's where we develop our capacity to cope. So what does the road ahead look for most of us? We have the post-pandemic shifts that we're still, struggling with. We have workplace emotional skills. Workplaces are becoming highly emotional in terms of, nearly everyone needs a degree in order to manage a workplace these days. We have the hybrid headache fallouts, which includes stuff like breakdowns in culture, sense of belonging, sense of loyalty, half the team at home, half the team on site, and the connections with us being at home where we kind of think we're on leave rather than on a different site that happens to be at home. We have recession fears and the great unknowns. These are all things that are happening externally around us that make us feel we're not in charge, we don't have the coping skills, that we can't cope, and that really generates that generalized anxiety that so many people of us are experiencing. So now let's have some fun. Let's look at your emotional engine. Who is the driver? You need to be the driver of your life, of your emotional world, of this emotional engine that is part of who we are intrinsically. And part of that is mastering cog empathy. Cog empathy is a cognitive empathy. It's where we filter our feelings of empathy through an intellectualized screen so that we don't slip into being over empathic or under empathic or even falsely empathic. And what we are doing is using our intellect to understand when do we need to have empathy and when do we need to make different choices and take a different avenue with the people and experiences we're having around us. The driver of the emotional engine must take control. You know, you need to kick your tires and check your mirrors. Look to the horizon, the what ifs, accept that stress and turbulence and the unexpected is really going to occur. Don't be in a sheltered world where you think you can control what's going to happen, because we really actually control very little. In fact, the best thing we control is ourselves. So that's why we mean take control. Kick your tires and check the mirrors. That means look after yourself. How's your health? How are you feeling? Take 10 minutes every morning to do an internal check about your mental state, your physical state, and whether you're ready for the day ahead. If we are looking to the horizon, think about the what ifs a bit more. You know, well, if things change, what if I try a new career? What if I actually end up fine? What if I take up some hobbies? The what if can be a very exciting adventure rather than an anxiety-provoking concept if we keep an eye on the horizon. Accepting stress and turbulence is the norm is going to be very important for you. So fighting it will cause panic attacks and anxiety and stress and burnout. However, accepting that stress and turbulence comes our way means that we have an opportunity to flex that resilience muscle, to develop new coping skills, and to discover our own growth and ability to be perhaps more masters of our destination and our destiny than we ever thought before. Know what your conflict go-to type is. All of us deal with conflict in very different ways. Some people are passive aggressive, some people are just aggressive, some people are assertive, some people take time to process what's being said and will come back later. Know how you function in conflict and know what your style is so that you can create balance and harmony when you are in a very stressful situation that can cause conflict with others or conflict within yourself. That lovely fight between what I want and what is actually happening, and that sense of unfairness and it's unjust in the world. Set a sustainable pace. If you're driving yourself through this world, make sure that the pace is a safe pace for you. It has some bends and curves. You can accelerate sometimes and put on the brakes when required, and refuel regularly. What that means is take the time to do some personal development. Take the time to check in on your therapy. Take the time to have really good, challenging conversations with people about where you're at and what you need and where you're looking for. So refuel regularly is really important for your emotional engine. You also need to be the navigator. A navigator is the person who's looking out into the world and thinking, how are we traveling? How are we going to get there? So name and notice the emotions you're experiencing. Yeah? And what that means is, I'm feeling a little bit unsettled, a little bit, stomach's doing a few flips, things like that. I'm experiencing some level of anxiety or some fear or some reaction in some way. So naming it and noticing it allows you to say the feeling is one thing and the concept is another. And if I know what it is, then I can put in place my coping strategies and my emotional resilience techniques in order to calm that down and realize what I am experiencing. Remember that emotions are data, not directives. And that means it's information. I'm experiencing something, but it doesn't mean I have to be that. So I'm experiencing some level of anxiety. It doesn't mean I have to become anxious. It just means I have to notice and name that something is making me uncomfortable. It might be a right and fantastic time now to explore that, or I might need to shelve that and come back to it and think, why did that make me feel a little anxious? Know the difference between eustressed and distressed and just stressed. So eustressed is when we turn stressful situations into a positive. We use it as a challenge, a problem-solving opportunity, and we drive that energy forward until it's released by resolving whatever is stressing us. Distress is when we sit into it, we lean back into that experience or a moment or whatever's happening, and we let it move our mood state low and we feel like we can't climb out of it. And just stressed is when we were starting to feel the pressure and the build-up, and our bodies are registering it. We know we're feeling a bit stressed. We know our reactions are starting to align with that stress level, and we are doing nothing yet about it. When we're feeling stressed, you can go eustressed or distressed. It's really up to you. Again, a choice factor, but know how to do it. Make pit stops as the navigator of your life. Yeah, make the pit stops. Turn off the road every now and then and go on an adventure. Stay at, a mental hotel, which in other words might be have a mental health day off. Take the pit stops you need in order to recalibrate, breathe, think about where you're going, think about what's happening. Do this regularly, because it's really important that if you're trying to direct your life and you're trying to make a plan of where you want to be in your life, that you are stopping and evaluating where you're coming from and where you're going to next. Use your set of values as your compass. So if you don't know how to find your values, send me a message and I can send you something on that. But work out what your values are and use them always as your compass. Is what I'm doing right now aligned with my values? Is what I'm doing right now pushing me out of my value set? The values that you hold dear and the values that are meaningful for you can always be your compass for your next decision and the next choice of where to go from here. And finally, know your personal code of conduct, your to-be list. Yeah, what do I want to be? How do I want to behave? What do I want people to know about me? A to-be list is just as important as your to-do list. Sometimes in life we have to be a passenger, and this is part of the emotional engine coping skills and ability to be resilient. Sometimes we just have to sit back in life and enjoy the journey. We don't always have to be driving ourselves forward. We don't always have to be navigating and planning what next. It's really important that every now and then we become a passenger in our own lives and just enjoy the ride, be it chaotic like a roller coaster, be it taking us somewhere that we've never been before. But sometimes it's good to be a passenger in the pathway that's happening in front of you and not fight it so much, but embrace it, even if it's uncomfortable or it gives you a little level of anxiety. Creating purpose is important as a passenger. Why did I take this route in the first place? I obviously wanted to learn something, to find out something about myself, or to experience something. So creating a purpose of why you're here in this moment in your life right now is also extremely enjoyable but important, in as far as reaffirming that I am exactly where I need to be right now, even if I'm not very comfortable with it, because there is reason. Look for your peak experiences. I think it's Abraham Maslow that talks about peak experiences are our natural mood lifter. Peak experience can be looking at a sunset and really looking at it, like marveling at the colours. It can be sitting on a swing if you haven't been on a swing for ages in the park. It can be trying new food. It can be starting a new hobby. Peak experiences are natural mood lifters, and they remind us of how beautiful the world is, how quiet sometimes we need to be in an experience, and again, to be a passenger of that experience rather than to trying to dominate it or control it or make a pathway through. Journeying for performance purpose can be really helpful for some people, especially if you're in one of those jobs where you're not quite sure why you're doing it, why you're there, what are you really driven for, but also performance purpose as a human being. So journaling about your performance as a human being, not just your mood states, but how you're contributing, what is affecting you, what are you noticing, what are you learning, what are you developing as you go along life's span. And as a passenger, belong. Our biggest driver as human beings is the sense of belonging. So belong, find a way to belong to your community, to your family, to your friends, to your partner, to the workplace that you're at. Belonging in some way is again another way that we develop so much resilience and can exercise our coping capacity, but also just enjoy being in a moment, being a passenger in this amazing life that can be yours. Let's get to the mechanic, right? The mechanic is exactly what it sounds like for your emotional engine, all right? Are you body fit? Check your oil. Like, are you nurturing your body? Are you looking after this aging machine that we are all in? Are you looking after your brain? Are you looking after your stomach, the mind-body connection? Check your oil. How am I caring for myself, both from an emotional level, but a physical level as well? Mind fit. They're like checking your airbags. Okay, so make sure that you have the space and the comfort and the air around you to be able to manage this life that you're in. And if not, you need to check that those airbags, which is your emotional resilience and your coping skills, are ready for action as soon as they are needed. Repairs. Seek support. Sometimes it's very hard to know when you need to support, but also coaching and therapy is really about us saying, and should be about us saying, you know, you don't really have a problem, you're doing really well, or yeah, I can see you're getting a little stuck here. Have you thought about looking at things from this perspective? So seek support. It doesn't always have to be a professional, but if you have a trusted friend or companion that usually steers you right, make sure you're connecting with them and just doing that, you know, internal repair. I'm feeling a bit meh at the moment, a bit meh. So I need to check in with someone and just have maybe a bit of love repair or a little friendship repair or a little support repair. Make sure you keep that up. Don't ignore the warning signs. You know, if your body is running on empty, that red light is flashing, needs fuel, please stop and fuel up. That may be taking some time out, taking some days off, going on a holiday, saying no to a couple of things, saying I can't to people that rely on you all the time. But don't ignore the warning signs that you need to self-care and you need to check in on your emotional engine and make sure that it's running fit for purpose. And finally, here is a seat at your mental boardroom. Ask yourself, who's in charge today? Is the driver in charge? The passenger in charge? Is it the mechanic? Is it the navigator? Is it the child in me? Is it the professional me? Sometimes knowing who is actually running your emotional show, who's actually behind this lovely engine of ours that drives our emotions, will help you realize maybe that's not the best version of me to take charge in today's activities or in this moment. So if we know who's kind of driving what we're feeling and where they come from, then that can give us a really great understanding of how to anchor ourselves into a better model, like bring out that healthy adult version, but come back later again and be body fit, mind fit, check the repairs, and have a really deep look about why am I allowing that version of myself to take control in this particular moment if it's not a healthy option. Let's look at some strategies though, okay? Enough chatting. 3 C's to coping: control, connect, cohesion. Control. Find laughter. You are in control of humour. You are in control of seeking things that give you enjoyment. Get the facts. If you're nervous, anxious, there's something coming up, find out as much as you can to get the facts about it, not the gossip and not the I thinks, the actual what is actually going to happen or is happening. Take precautions. Okay, if you know there's going to be a stressful event coming up, take precautions around that. Are you ready for it? Have you thought it through? Are you mind fit and body fit? Take precautions really means do what you can to make it the most comfortable experience you can without trying to avoid it. Anticipate short-term stress. We know it happens. We know stress happens all the time, and we just have to turn on the news and another thing happens and another thing happens. So anticipate you're going to have these short bursts of stress, but you are in control to let it go, change what you can, control what you can, and the rest you're just going to have to let go and go, there's only so much that I can take on board at the moment. Some of these things I can observe and watch, but I don't need to hold them. Adapt to fluidity. That really means become a river. You've got to just go down that path. Sometimes we just have to move with the change and the discomfort and the problems that arise. And the better we are at adapting to this, the more flexible we are, the happier we become. And limit your exposure to news. News is generated to stimulate our brains, and it usually is by scaring the bejeebies out of us by all these horrible things going in the world. Same with social media. Make sure you're limiting your exposure to negativity, whatever screens you use. Be aware that being bombarded by negativity, things that cause you stress or things that just aren't positive, has an internal effect. It's that vicarious depression, and it's not just good for you. Go and do something like a peak experience and lift your mood. Connect. Emotional resilience, emotional stability, mental health is based in this lovely ability for us to connect. So working on establishing new bonds, reconnecting with old bonds in new ways, but know that a sense of belonging is very important to our mental health. Look at mindfulness meditation. To be honest, I do struggle with it, but I think some people really resonate with it. But if you can't do a mindfulness meditation, then take up a hobby like drawing or painting or knitting or pottery or beading or something, woodwork, whatever it is. Once we're using our hands and focusing on what our hands are doing, we are creating a meditative state and a mindfulness experience. Learn to be more tolerant with people, learn to contemplate more, and learn to empathize more. So when we connect with people, we have to kind of step back from being so judgmental and assuming that everyone's rules are our rules and that your way is the right way. So practice being tolerant of other people's experiences, of their attitudes, of their behaviours, as long as it doesn't cross your value set. Be contemplating more, sit in the moment more, sit in the reasoning, the whys more, and be more empathic, not only to the rest of the world and to yourself, but to, I suppose, the experiences that other people may or may not be having or may not be aware of. Cohesion is the ability to exist with realistic fears in terms of being emotionally strong. So I have to know that, stuff is happening in the world, as well as know that really good stuff is also happening to me. So we have to coexist with these aligning or parallel experiences and know that there's some fears that are very realistic, but they can't dominate our well-being and they can't dominate all our choices. Observe what's going on, but yet stand apart. So we can observe things, like a lioness watching her cubs fight and frolic around. If you watch any of those animal movies, the lioness just sits there calmly watching for any danger, but just keeping an eye on things. Be the owl, if you like, in your life. Be observant, but know that you don't have to interact in everything. You don't have to be involved in everything. Create a new narrative to anchor yourself. So storylines, self-stories that are really important are, I can cope with this, that this is really difficult for me, but I'll find my way through, that I have the resilience to manage this, and live with your values. These are just a few. You can go on my website, Mindset Meditations, which are really about being positive and confident and around that emotional capacity to be resilient. So if you want those, you can just jump on my website. So the mind is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets and the more it can expand. So the more that we do these kinds of things, the more we are deeper thinking about why am I driving in this direction in my life? Why am I navigating this pathway forward? Why am I not sitting back and just enjoying this moment, this experience, this time in my life? And why am I not checking in? Are really great questions to start to build your own emotional strength and mental well-being, but also to understand that it's an ever evolving experience being a human being. And just because you've done some work in the past doesn't mean, you don't need to do it again. In every decade, we are changing and growing and developing. And it's really important that you constantly check in on yourself and make sure that emotional engine is running really smoothly. Okay, so what I'm really talking about there is looking after your emotional engine. Why do we need to do it? Because if you want really good mental health, if you want to be strong mentally, then you can't ignore that there is this emotional engine, this amygdala in our brains that is driving us forward, that is creating a mental pathway forward, that is either being a passenger or a disruption to our experiences, and that needs to be checked in on and needs to have, a grease and oil change every now and then. All right, I hope that helped you understand a little more about having an emotional engine. And thank you for that question.